So the opponents won the die roll, so they get to choose. And now we do have to decide if we want a mulligan, and we kind of get punished here for having an attune with no green. So I think this hand is still kind of keepable, since we just need one land of any color to start casting our cards. And we do have 9 forests in our deck, so I think this is still fine. And our opponent did mulligan to 6, so that's good for us. And we are on the draw, so that's an extra draw step for us. Alright, so did not find a land yet, but that's fine. Lawless Broker is another 3-drop if we find any land. And our opponent with an Eddy Trail Hawk, that's fine. So they get 2 energy and they can send one of their creatures to the skies. Alright, forest is a nice one, so we can just play out our attune here and get a second forest. And also get 2 energy. So if we ever find our Longtusk cubs, we can make those larger. Opponent's gonna hit us for 1. And no turn 3 played, so that's also good. And here we have to decide if we want to play out the Screecher or the Lawless Broker. Screecher doesn't line up very well against a Eddy Trail Hawk, so I think we just play out a Broker and then play out Malphis Squad and go from there. I guess a reason not to play the Broker first is that if our opponent wants to kill it, then we have no creature to put the +1/+1 counter on. But if they want to use a removal spell on the Broker, I think that's fine. Alright, Acrobatic Maneuver on their Eddy Trail Hawk just to draw a card and get 2 more energy, that's fine. And here we can definitely just attack and I think play the Malphis Squad. And I think we want to make a servo token to have an artifact for the Foundry's creature. And that might tempt our opponent into maybe playing a card and make a servo to maybe block the Malphis Squad that has menace. And then we can get them with make obsolete. So let's go to combat. Attack with the Lawless Broker. And then play out Malphis Squad. And make a servo. And say go. And we also have Tidy Conclusion if our opponent has a larger creature. Alright, no plays, but we keep drawing lands unfortunately. So here, let's play our land so we have access to Tidy Conclusion. And I think just attack with our 2 creatures. See what happens. That works. And then we'll just play out our Foundry's creature. And say go. And I guess hope our opponent doesn't have a make obsolete, since that would kill 3 of our creatures here. Alright, a Blooming Marsh, so our opponent's on 3 colors and might be missing one of their colors, but I guess now they've found one. Let's untap. Seed Sculptor is a nice one, since that could put a counter on the creature so it doesn't trade with a hawk. Our opponent's at 11 though. So they're close to being dead. If we just put the, let's see, If we play the Seed Sculptor, put the counter on the servo token, attack with everyone, our opponent blocks this creature. Also have the option of playing Make Obsolete, so it doesn't trade. Opponent takes 8, down to 3. I think I like that play. And then we still have the Tidy Conclusion left, or we can just Tidy Conclusion the Addy Trail Hawk. Would be bad if our opponent has another maneuver. We would be getting in for maybe more damage. I think I like the Seed Sculptor play here. And if our opponent has some instant speed removal spell for this creature, maybe they have the one that deals 3 damage to an attacking creature. Yeah, I think we just put it on the servo. And then go to combats. I guess if our opponent has removal for the servo, the Foundry's creature also shrinks down. Alright, so opponent makes the obvious block, and I think we do use the Make Obsolete here. Alright, that works. Opponent's at 3. They kind of need a sweeper effect here. And with only single white, that doesn't seem likely. Alright, so we got there. Opponent stumbled a little bit and didn't cast very many spells, so we didn't get to see much of their deck. They are 3 colors, so I think being more aggressive and trying to punish their draws where they are missing one of their colors is best. So I don't think we want any of these slow decoction module cards. I don't think we want the Thriving Rats. I think our configuration looks fine, and maybe we can adjust after sideboard. Could maybe take out a Wild Wanderer and add another 2-drop. But I think this is fine. Just try again. And this time we are missing black, but we have the turn to Longtusk Cub, so I think we have to keep this one. Also have a turn 3 Freighter if we draw any land, plus we can always play the Puzzle Knot. So let's play a land and say go. And hopefully they don't have a 2-drop creature here. Alright, they have a Seed Sculptor, which is a little awkward, since that's just gonna block our cub. But I think we still played out, and then next turn we can play the Freighter. So this way our opponent either has to have a blocker back for the cub, or they can't attack with a Seed Sculptor basically. And if we ever find one of our energy cards, we can also maybe pump up the cub. Alright, Fairgrounds Trumpeter. But they already played the Seed Sculptor, so it's not gonna get a counter from that one. No attacks, makes sense. Alright, more forests. Kind of need to find a swamp at some point, but for now we can just play the Freighter, which is not bad. And say go. Opponent with a High Spire Artisan. So they get a 1/4. And I don't think they have any good attacks because we can still crew the Freighter on defense. Interesting. Well, we can just crew and block with the Freighter. So our opponent might have missed that interaction. Trumpeter does get a +1 counter. And still no black mana. Let's start by casting the Puzzle Knot and hope to find a swamp here. Alright, there we go, perfect. So, now that we have access to black mana, could play the Die Young, could play Rush of Vitality, could also play Die Young and just use the energy to pump the Longtusk Cub, since it doesn't actually kill any of the opponent's creatures. If we attack with the Cub and our opponent blocks, we could rush. Could also just crew the Freighter and then use the rush. I think I like that more, just because that naturally attacks into the opponent's board. And that's gonna work out pretty well. So let's just crew and attack and see if our opponent wants to block or not. Alright, our opponent just takes it, it's also fine, and I don't think we want to use the Die Young without actually killing anything, so we'll just say go here. And it costs 3 mana to sack the Puzzle Knot, so we can't do that end of turn, unfortunately. Opponent with Fabrication Module, alright, so that plus the Trumpeter could start getting out of hand, since they can make multiple +1/+1 counters, essentially. But this turn, they're not going to be able to do much. They are attacking us for 4. Alright, don't mind that, since that opens up the door for the Longtusk Cub to get in there. Even though, admittedly, the Cub is gonna be smaller than the opponent's creatures with their Fabrication Module. But yeah, we can just play Cub and Screecher, crew the Freighter with one of our summoning sick creatures and get in there. I think that works out pretty well for us. Don't think there's any better options available. Could actually attack with the Cub, get to energy and use that plus the Die Young to kill off the Trumpeter, which is also pretty appealing. So that means we can't play the Screecher, but we could still play the Cub to crew the Freighter. I actually don't hate that play, since the Trumpeter is kind of scary with the module in play. So I think we go for that. Does mean we don't get to pump up the Cub, but we still have a flyer in our hand that can attack, plus a combat trick, so I think this works out fine. Alright. And then we'll use Die Young and pay 3, so we still have 1 left over. And say go. And if the opponent spends 4 mana activating the Fabrication Module, we can still attack with our Freighter into the Artisan. And if they make a bigger creature, we still have the Rush of Vitality. But they do still have 4 cards in hand, so they could have lots of things, but instead they decide to concede. Well, kind of unexpected, but maybe your opponent was kind of new to Magic, since they did make a few mistakes that we saw, so who knows. But anyways, we'll be back in the next match.